Mr. President, I begin my remarks in favor of the proposition that Holocaust denial should not be criminalized in the 21st century on a note of personal privilege. I remind those assembled here, both all who shall vote, that I am, in all likelihood, the only person in this room whose life would have been materially changed had there existed in this country a law outlawing Holocaust denial. Had there been such a law, David Irving would not have been able to bring a libel suit against me for calling him a denier. Had there been such a law, I would not have had to devote approximately 6 years of my life, not to my research, not to my students or my personal life, but to fighting for my right for free speech. Had there been such a law, I would not have had to contemplate an offer by David Irving to drop the suit if I publicly apologized for calling him a Holocaust denier and agreed to have all the remaining copies of my book, in which I did, pulped. Had there been such a law, I would not have had to worry if I did not contest this suit against me, other scholars, writers, journalists, students would have found it impossible to write about deniers and see their words in print. Ironically, once David Irving was invited to this venue to speak about free speech. After the trial, there were a few lone voices that bemoaned his loss of free speech. Those voices had it all wrong. If free speech was an issue in this lawsuit, and it was mine that was at stake. I fought this fight not just for my freedom of expression, but for any other author who wished to write about David Irving or any denier. Why then do I speak in favor of this motion, namely that Holocaust denial should not be criminalized? Firstly, I favor this motion because I am a fierce defender of the right to free speech. I recognize that governments do limit free speech, including treason, slander, libel, and the proverbial crying of fire in a crowded theater. But the limiting of ideas, including the most obnoxious hate-inspired ideas, is not an activity we should allocate to the government. Ironically, I make this argument here in the United Kingdom, a locale whose libel laws have had and continue to have disastrous consequences for those engaged in academic and journalistic inquiry. There was a reason why David Irving waited until my book was published in this country to sue me for libel. He knew that my hands were tied, because in the UK, the onus, the burden of proof is on the defendant to prove the truth of what they said, and not on the plaintiff to prove the falsehood. Hence, had I chosen not to fight, as many people, including other scholars, urged me not to do, he would have won by default. It then would have been illegal to call the then world's leading Holocaust denier a denier. Moreover, in the United States, we have something called the public figure defense. It prevents those who willingly choose to put themselves in the public eye, politicians, authors, journalists, and even actors, from suing for libel in relation to their public activities. Based on the 1964 Supreme Court case, New York Times v. Sullivan, before a public figure can claim to have been libeled or slandered, she or he must prove actual malice, that the person who wrote or spoke the contested words knew or should have known that these words were untrue. To do otherwise, to allow public figures to claim libel or slander, would result, the Supreme Court ruled, in too severe an infringement of free speech. Secondly, I support this motion because I fear giving governments and government officials the wherewithal to decide what is permissible to say and what is not. Is minimalization a crime? Is trivialization? PETA, for example, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, talk about if you eat chicken, it's a Holocaust on your plate. Is that a form of denial? What is that? Who would decide? Who would define Holocaust denial? Who would write the legislation? An MP from Surrey or Yorkshire? A faceless bureaucrat? And then who rules? A judge who knows no history? A jury? Thirdly, I support this motion because I feel that from a strategic perspective, Holocaust denials are not efficacious. They turn Holocaust denial into forbidden fruit and render it far more inviting or appealing to those who enjoy being outliers. Nor do I believe that we should debate Holocaust deniers, just as we would not debate flat earth theorists, we would not debate people who might argue pedophilia is a good thing. My fourth reason for support of this motion is that laws against Holocaust denial suggest, as two of my colleagues here argued earlier, suggest that we do not have the facts, figures, and extensive documentation to prove precisely what happened. The Holocaust has the dubious distinction of being the best documented genocide in the world. The history, the facts, and the documents protect it, not proposed laws. Mr. President, ever cognizant of Ralph Waldo Emerson's warning about foolish consistencies being the hobgoblins of small minds, I admit to understanding why Germany and Austria, even in Poland, might have such laws, though I don't know that they have the desired effect. But clearly this was understandable, as Sir Richard Evans argued a moment ago, in the post-war era. I am not sure it is necessary now. Some, including my worthy opponents, have supported the institution of such laws because they argue deniers can incite violence. They confuse hate speech and violence. I would argue that the two are quite different. Holocaust denial can constitute violence, can constitute incitement, but it does not always do so. I support this motion, Mr. President, because I am convinced that freedom of speech means nothing unless it includes the freedom for offensive people to be offensive. We who are offended by them must accept that as a cost of living in a free society. I close, therefore, by noting, as I did at the outset, that though my life would have been materially affected by the existence of such a law, I oppose it because of the far more substantial negative impact it would have on the free democratic society in which I live and whose values I treasure. I tremble at the thought that we might leave the regulation of ideas in the hands of politicians. It is far too costly a proposition to let the scoundrels among them, with their notions of what can and cannot be said, to trump the right of free speech. Thank you.